We look at a face, not just the shape of eyes and lips, but the quiet details that linger in every line, every shadow. There's something mesmerizing about a portrait, not just a representation of the face, but a blend between observation and insight. Portrait art translates identity into narrative undertones that linger long after the work is done. Is it the accuracy of form, the fidelity of resemblance, or something more abstract, a flicker of unseen personality? Today, we'll walk through my investigation into what truly makes portrait art good, from capturing mood and gesture to choosing what to show and what to leave behind. First, I wanted to check my background knowledge. I recalled many portrait paintings I had seen, and almost always, the most striking features were the eyes. You may have heard that eyes are the windows to the soul, and sometimes they are all you need to tell a story. To test this theory, I sketched 7 eyes expressing 7 emotions: joy, anger, sadness, fear, shock, surprise, and apathy. Then I created a poll asking what emotion people thought each eye was expressing. The results were mixed, generally alike, but also inconclusive. It seemed that eyes were not sufficient to tell a story, but maybe, I thought, it was also because I didn't draw them very well. I shifted my focus to facial anatomy as a whole, and decided to search up some muscle diagrams of the human face. I quickly realized that this was completely unnecessary, so I decided to take a different approach. What people often don't understand about the human body is that everything can be broken down into shapes. When artists see a face, they see a framework of ratios and geometry. Surprisingly, art contains a lot of math. A subject is first dissected into lines and planes. Certain ratios must match, such as the space between the nose and eyes to the space between the nose and mouth. In a real human face, these ratios are never the same, because every face is unique. But I began with a model of what we might call a very stereotypical human face for practice. Over the course of a few weeks, I began doing some studies of the same face, broken down into planes and at different angles. To help me remember their features, I also searched up their anatomical names. The frontal bone, cheekbones, nasal bridge, brow ridge, chin, and eyelids are parts of the face that face up and catch light. Then we have the eye sockets, the mental crease, the maxilla, and the mandible, which are often shadowed because they face down. Our organs for facial expression could all be contained in this T-shaped region. Finally, I did a study of a Greek statue, because I also wanted to practice some lighting. All of this didn't really teach me anything about portraits specifically, though. I just learned how to draw people properly, and while people are the subject of many portraits, there is way more to them than anatomical accuracy. It was time to do some research. What exactly are portraits meant to depict? A person, sure, but how is that person characterized? If you look at the art of famous painters like Da Vinci or Van Gogh, there's a substance and presence in their paintings, as if you caught the subject in a snippet of their story. But these are pretty abstract concepts. The question I ended up asking myself is, how exactly do you capture personality? I think this quote from an article by Artists Network answers my initial question. Quote, "For the pictures of people that I want to do, line, form, color, and light are not enough. They are the servants, not the master. They are what depicts, not what is depicted. What is depicted is the human presence. Because it's not only about how the subject looks, but who the subject is in their story. I am representing not just a person, but the mood and experiences of that person, and everything in the painting must come together to show it. Bright colors might be used to depict a joyful event, sharp lines and darkness to show hopelessness and conflict, or an upright posture to show independence and defiance. But ultimately, what matters is that I must know the story of my subject." To apply what I learned, I needed a subject with very distinctive characterizations and personalities. The person I picked was Lucifer. First, a little background information on his many depictions. Lucifer in Christian theology is often identified with Satan, the first angel who rebelled against God and was cast out of heaven. He symbolized pride, arrogance, and temptation, and sought to lead humanity astray. In the Roman characterization, Lucifer meant light-bringer. He was a personification of the morning star, or Venus, which appears before dawn and was often depicted holding a torch. Romans saw Lucifer as radiant and beautiful, the bringer of dawn, rather than evil and rebellious. The depiction of Lucifer in medieval epics, such as Dante's Inferno, had him fully identified with Satan, the grotesque ruler of hell and the most deadly of the 7 deadly sins. Dante's Inferno, very briefly summarized, follows Dante, guided by Virgil as he descends through the 9 circles of hell, each punishing different sins with symbolic torments. At the very bottom, in the frozen lake of Cocytus, Dante finds Lucifer, a giant monster with 3 heads and 6 wings, consuming history's greatest traitors, like Judas, Brutus, and Cassius. Lucifer in the story represents despair, impotence, and betrayal, the source of all evil. This depiction is contrasted by John Milton's Paradise Lost, which tells the story of Satan's rebellion and fall from heaven, his plotting against God, and his temptation of Adam and Eve in Eden. Here, Lucifer is written as a tragic and sympathetic anti-hero, illustrated by his famous declaration, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." He is at first portrayed as the embodiment of ambition and defiance, persuasive, brave, and even inspiring to his followers. His desire for self-determination and resistance to tyranny is very human, which mirrors his appearance as a very handsome individual. As the poem progresses, however, Lucifer becomes increasingly bitter, consumed by envy and hatred. In the end, he and his followers are transformed into serpents, a punishment that mirrors his deception in Eden. In summary, Lucifer is often either depicted as a handsome, tragic rebel, at first a bringer of light, but casted out for his pride, or a hideous beast, representing all that is wrong with the world. All of this is too much to contain in one design, so I decided to make 2, one portrait of before his fall and one of after, taking elements from the widespread perceptions of his identity. We'll start with Lucifer Morningstar, the angel. I was heavily inspired by The Fallen Angel by Alexandre Cabanel, who takes a more Milton approach to Lucifer. Here, Lucifer is a youthful, muscular, almost idealized male figure, painted with the beauty of a classical hero. But his eyes look upwards in bitterness, rage, and sorrow. Cabanel captures the paradox of Lucifer as both tragically beautiful and dangerously proud. I took elements from Cabanel's portrayal of him as a very beautiful man. He holds a torch and emits light, part of his Roman light-bringer aspect. He is looking straight at us with a very arrogant, sure-of-himself expression, alluding to his sin of pride. Finally, I also wrapped his arms in ribbon-like cloth, symbolizing how he feels restricted in heaven since his pride cannot accept subordination. For Lucifer, the monstrous ruler of hell, I took inspiration from Lucifer by Franz von Stuck. Here, Lucifer looks almost inhuman. While he isn't monstrous by any means, the look in his eyes is intense, dark, and unsettling. He sits as a shadowy figure, with a rigid posture as though he is not defeated, but rather waiting, and stares directly at us, like he is blaming the viewer for his situation. I incorporated this portrayal of him as human, yet inhuman, specifically his terrifying eyes. I also took elements of Lucifer from Dante's Inferno, and gave him 3 heads as well as 4 bat wings, because I low-key didn't want to paint 6. Finally, as a throwback to classic medieval depictions, I gave him some ram horns, primarily due to the association of goats with sin, and thus with the devil. My process from the ugly stages of my paintings to the final versions were honestly more disorganized than I expected. Better artists will paint the piece as a whole, layer by layer, rather than jumping from part to part like I did. Regardless, I am satisfied with the story I wanted to tell. The color palette for Lucifer the Angel is vibrant and bright. For darker colors, I saturated the amount of pigment that I used, rather than using black paint, which gives it an ambient, impressionist effect. I had a hard time picking the background color. I chose to use a lot of darker blues in the background to contrast the warmer tones of his skin and the yellow of his light. We often associate blue with peace, authority, and masculinity, but also with coldness, which reflects his identity here. Lucifer's posture is open and confident, a youthful, almost idealistic man. The light in his eyes makes him look almost naive, untouched by darkness, yet his expression carries an element of mischief or maliciousness, indicating his multifaceted personality as both bringer of light and the embodiment of pride. The color palette for Lucifer, the ruler of hell, is all darkness and dirty colors. There's a lot of browns and blacks melting together until all that shines through are his eyes. In direct contrast to the lively human eyes I painted for Milton's depiction of Lucifer, Lucifer's eyes here are demonic and unearthly. There's a light in them too, but the light seems to come from within, and the shrunken irises stare straight at the viewer, accusing us of something. Lucifer's posture is hunched, stiff, and defensive, his body slightly emaciated, yet his dark expression contradicts his posture. With these two paintings side by side, you can see how the story and personality of a character can completely change the perception of them as a person. No matter which version of Lucifer you favor, one thing is clear. Portraits aren't just about what the subject looks or doesn't look like. It is also about the complexity of their identity. We mold our portraits with the narratives that we want to depict, and that is what makes them come alive. Thank you for listening.